Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So we're back with another opinion video, and I think we're going to try, again, I always say we're going to try this or that, but I like to keep you updated. We're going to try to alternate kind of opinion and other videos since we're still stuck at home. Kind of sucks, but while I'm talking today, enjoy some clips that we took from a very much from a safe distance of some buses in our local neighborhood. There's some TransLink buses, a couple CNG buses, just kind of some nice clips to watch as I talk. But the topic of today's video is essentially what I've been doing while I've been stuck at home. Now, to be perfectly clear, this isn't going to be an exhaustive list because there's a lot of things I've been doing, not all of which are particularly productive. But some things I have been doing and spent a significant amount of time doing have been transit related and quite productive in my opinion, so I wanted to share them with you. One thing I think we often find ourselves feeling when other people talk about transit systems or when we hear about transit systems is kind of a sense of mystery or confusion, or just a sense that, like, I don't really understand that system, I don't know kind of the geography of what you're talking about. You know, someone is trying to get a point across and it can be sometimes kind of hard to understand. For example, a lot of the time I hear people talking about systems in Germany, and I know Germany has good transit systems. We typically know what systems are good, what countries have good systems, what countries don't have good systems, but often we don't know the specifics. We don't know really how good systems are, how they got to be so good, the history, the layouts, etc. And so I thought, why not just spend time learning about other transit systems? Now, of course, we can't travel right now, which is unfortunate, because learning more about different transit systems has made me want to travel more and go visit all kinds of different systems in different cities. The reality is, you're just never going to be able to have the time to travel to every location you want to. But I think following kind of what I've done and learning about systems online in a pretty effective way could be a great way to kind of pseudo travel to systems and get really comfortable with them without actually having to visit those cities. So let's get started. So I tend to have kind of 3 or 4 main things I do to get comfortable with systems that I haven't visited, often in cities that I haven't spent a lot of time in, but sometimes just in cities I know, but where I haven't spent a ton of time on the systems. The first step for me is always Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps. Now, I love OpenStreetMaps, but Google Maps and Apple Maps, though particularly Google Maps, has really the best transit support I find of any mapping application. I have spent, since maybe the age of 10 or 12, probably thousands and thousands of hours on Google Maps, doing everything from looking at what buildings look like from space, to learning different roadways and the geography of my own hometown, to looking at different transit lines in different countries. Google Maps is just fantastic, and what's made it even better in recent years is the fact that the old Google Earth style features like flyover, etc., are now basically built on the same technology as Apple's flyovers, i.e. Google has planes that fly over cities and create 3D depth maps, so you can basically see a 3D skyline view of a ton of cities around the world. Pretty much of any major city that's in a country that's kind of hospitable to Google will have a 3D flyover map. And it's a great way to kind of get an idea of the topography, the skyline, all kinds of those type of details for different cities. Some of you may not know this, but I'm also really passionate, as I imagine some of you are, about kind of architecture and tall buildings, skyscrapers, and so this is a really good way of exploring the skylines of cities you can't actually visit. Now, the next thing I want to talk about for a second is the airports. Now, as you know, we also are fans of aviation and airports when used appropriately. We also think high-speed rail and rail transportation has a big role to play. One of the greatest things you can do on Google Maps, and one of the first things I like to do whenever I visit a different city, is find the airport. Airports are gigantic and you can pretty much find them quickly without a search at any time. It's a great way to get an idea where the airport or potentially airports in a city are located, and then it kind of gives you an idea, where with respect to the city center is the airport located. Like, for example, in Paris, where Charles de Gaulle is to the north of the center of the city, London, where Heathrow is to the west, or Seoul, where again Incheon is to the kind of west-southwest of the city center. Just kind of getting an idea of where the airports are and what the airports and terminals look like is a great way to experience the airports and potentially how that relates to the transit of a city. Now, of course, while I'm on Google Maps, I also usually have Wikipedia open. Now, Wikipedia is an incredibly powerful tool, obviously, and another thing I've spent thousands and thousands of hours on, both contributing and reading over the years. Now, one thing I really do want to note though is that Wikipedia can be incredibly variable, since it is basically user contributed for the large part, because while Wikipedia does have people they hire to write articles, typically I don't think those people are writing the articles on particular stations, etc. So you'll find for some cities, you might have a Wikipedia page that's detailed for every single station of the system. And then other cities, you might have a very short Wikipedia page for an entire system. So depending on where you are and what you're able to do, I really recommend considering contributing to those pages, especially if there's a particular station you like a lot. As long as you're giving kind of honest, factual information, it's a great way to teach people in the future about cities you like, systems you like, and stations you like. Now, of course, basically combining that Wikipedia knowledge and Google Maps gives you kind of a high-level overview of what lines and systems look like. You can see what kind of modes, etc. certain lines are using on Wikipedia. Say it says this line is a metro or this line is a monorail. It's a great way of kind of combining the information from two places and putting it together to kind of get a sense of what a system looks like. For example, Wikipedia will often tell you that there's X number of trains, but it won't often talk about the maintenance and storage facilities on different metro systems, which can be really pertinent to their operations and kind of routings, etc. A great thing you can do in Google Maps, again, is go and look for those operations and maintenance facilities. Pretty much any transit line you find is going to have an operations and maintenance facility attached to it somewhere along the line. It will largely be a big kind of warehouse style building that you'll easily see from Google Maps, and you'll see lots of loops of track, etc. And so it's a good way of getting a sense of how the system operates. One location I found really interesting, if you want to go check it out yourself, is the area around the Mexico City International Airport. It has a ton of lines basically terminating just to the south of it, and several of those lines have their OMFs kind of at the end of the line. So it's an interesting thing you can kind of learn about different systems. Now the next thing that can be really beneficial is to just go and click on different stops. Now, when you do this, what you'll find out is what are the service frequencies looking like. Now, again, I have to caution, make sure if you're looking at a city that's outside of your time zone, you're not looking in the middle of the night or, at 5 in the morning and getting a really misrepresented basically vision of what the service frequency looks like. But within reason, take a look and see how often do the trains come, how often do the buses come, how many lines stop at this station. It's a really good way of getting an idea of the frequencies and the type of service being offered at different locations. Of course, be careful, because as many of us know, sometimes Google Maps and Google Maps Transit doesn't always work perfectly, and sometimes you might miss a bunch of services. So all of this is something where you just kind of have to, take it with a grain of salt, but you'll definitely learn a bit more. Now, next up, YouTube. I had to say it. I definitely recommend you go watch our videos. There's a lot of great reference style footage that I think is more useful for learning about systems in places we haven't visited. For example, I've been watching a lot of first-person view videos of the S-Bahn in Berlin, which has been a great way to see, how does Berlin have such a massive train network? What do the right-of-ways look like? What do the stations look like? Hint, hint, they look like regular rail right-of-ways, not necessarily clusters of skyscrapers at every stop, pretty reasonable scale for the stations. But again, these are things you learn when you spend the time to watch some FPV videos or something like that. Now, I know these type of videos can be super boring, so what I tend to do is turn the speed up to 2 or even higher if you have the option, and then also skip through move through the video at kind of a high speed just to get a sense of what the system looks like. It's a really good approach you can take. Another awesome type of video I really recommend checking out is trip report style videos. Now, kind of goes without saying, there's a lot of YouTubers who make these type of videos, and so if you just Google railway trip reports, there's a number of really good channels which you could check out, particularly in Europe, I find. These type of videos are not as much about the infrastructure as about the experience, which I find really interesting. For example, people will often talk a bit about what the station's like, how often the train travels, or the bus, or the plane, what the pricing is like, what the actual interiors of the vehicles are like, what the vehicle is, you know, maybe it's some weird vehicle. It can just be a really interesting way of getting a sense of, you know, what kind of trains are operating on some of these high-speed rail routes in Europe, or even some of the night routes and local routes. So now with all that in mind, Google Maps, Wikipedia, YouTube as well, I've basically been taking that and using it to learn as much as I can about different transit systems, because I think knowledge is really power, and the more you know about different systems, the more reference points you have. I find when new systems are getting proposed in different locations, often having a kind of awareness of what other systems are like is a really effective way to kind of approach those new systems. You can kind of say, that system is a lot like, you know, XYZ. So before I finish off the video, I do want to list a bunch of the cities that I've spent a lot of time checking out. I think a lot of these cities you'll hear more about because I've become interested in them by doing all this research and spending lots of time visiting them on Google. Street View as well is an awesome tool. Don't want to forget that. So what are those cities? So I'd say Seoul, I spent a lot of time in. Auckland, if you commented about Auckland, New Zealand, that led to like, I watched every Auckland transport video on YouTube and like spent hours and hours in Google Maps learning about the city rail link, etc. So if you commented about Auckland, I know a lot about Auckland. You guys are doing good. You know, LA, I spent a lot of time in. LA is great for airports and not that great for transit. Who knew? Berlin. Berlin is actually the opposite of LA. It's terrible for airports. If you know about Berlin, Brandenburg, you know what I'm talking about. But it's great for transit. So Berlin is one that you should check out. Mexico City, a lot of people on our Discord will know about that because I had a bunch of time where I was talking about Mexico City, but the metro there is impressive. And another great thing is that you can often see pre-construction happening. So there's kind of a regional rail link happening to the southwest of Mexico City, connecting to kind of some new up-and-coming areas of the city as well as a neighboring city. It's a really impressive project using like European rail traffic management system, ERTMS, the European Signaling and Traffic Management, essentially. It's built almost entirely on guideways. It's just a crazy regional rail system being built in Mexico City. And since Mexico City is one of those cities where I'm sure there's a lot of Spanish language content, but there's not a ton in English, a lot of time spent in Google Maps has taught me a lot. So it's very interesting. I'd also say some cities in Russia, like Moscow and St. Petersburg, Tokyo. I spent a lot of time looking at Tokyo, Sydney, Melbourne, Chicago, Miami, Dallas, Phoenix even. I've spent so much time on Google Maps lately. Anyways, guys, I hope you're staying well. We're gonna keep making lots of videos. As always, thanks for watching and have a nice night.